This is a regular meeting of the Brookline Select Board for Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. And we don't have town meeting afterwards, so we're going to take our time tonight.
Not too much time.
Not too much time. I still love time limits, but I won't feel as rushed. So announcements and updates, I just have one. I'd like to congratulate Jesse Geller, our ZBA chair, who was awarded on Friday this year's Citizen Planner Award from the American Planning Association Massachusetts chapter. Any board members with news and updates? Miriam?
Yes, thank you. I have two. I would just like to let everybody know that we have ARPA Review Committee meeting Friday at 3 o'clock. Please join us. We hope to be finalizing changes we made to the grant application and with the plan of starting to accept applications in January, right after everyone returns from the new year. And the second is the Division of Nursing and Epidemiology at the Brookline Department of Public Health is hosting a walk-in flu clinic on Wednesday, December 21st from 9 to 4 at 11 Pierce Street. Appointments are not needed. You can make an appointment. You can call DPH, but you can just walk in. The clinic will be open to those ages 5 to 64 because they won't have high-dose flu vaccine. Please bring insurance cards and masks. And I will just give a plea to please get your flu shot. Flu cases have spiked. We are in the middle of the flu season, and with COVID and RSV, just doing everybody a favor, especially yourself and your friendly neighborhood ER, if you get your flu shot. That's it. Thank you. PSA over.
Great. Mike.
Just one thing, the athletic field surface task force report is so close to being finished. An executive summary went out to all of the members yesterday, and I'm hoping to get this all together and actually be able to send out a report after our meeting on Friday.
Great. John.
Mike sort of triggered a memory with me of something else that was circulated with the select board this week. And I certainly hope it'll be circulated widely. A really thorough report on what is known as Warrant Article 26. And for those who don't immediately recognize what that is all about, this is on the subject matter of town recreation programs and the folks that they reach, and whether there needs to be a concerted effort to widen the reach of town recreation programs so that they are as inclusive as they possibly can be. And a task force was set up as a result of action at town meeting to look into all of those questions and come up with a report so that we can take action going forward. And I just have to say, it's a terrific report, really well done. And I congratulate the members of that task force. And it was done in a very timely fashion. They worked hard and they worked quickly and responsively. And they have produced a report that is well worth reading.
Great. I did see that, but I have not had a chance to read it. Thank you very much, John, for that update.
Sure.
Anyone else? Let's move into public comment.
All right. I'm going to give the quick intro to that. Thanks to members of the public if they are here to join us for joining us for public comment. It's an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. There's a few rules. Each person speaking tonight limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time. You may if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and refrain from addressing personnel issues. Sometimes questions are raised during public comment. We'll do our best to answer them. We might get staff to, or request that staff get back to you with a more thorough answer in the near future. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. So please conclude your remarks at that time. And if you have more to say, please feel welcome to send an email to the select board. Devin, do we have anyone for public comment?
No one has signed up for public comment in advance. At this time, there are 16 attendees, and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
So I got a note from our state rep, Tommy Vitolo, who thought we were in person. And so he is walking back home from town hall. I assume that he will try to get your attention, Devin, at some point. And I told him that we will take his public comment when he has joined the meeting.
He just wants us to be in person. All right, then. Back to you, Heather.
Thank you so much. At this time, we will move into our miscellaneous agenda and take the meeting minutes from December 8th first. Any comments, edits, questions? Bernard?
Yeah, I just want to note that I did make some clarifying changes or edits to the minutes regarding something I said.
Okay. And those are with Kate?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I will move the amended meeting minutes of December 8th. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike? Oh, your audio may not be working. Okay. Mike says aye, and I say, the chair says aye. While Mike figures out his audio, we'll go to the rest of the miscellaneous. I move accepting a grant from the state 911 Department Support and Incentive Program, Incentive Grant Program in the amount of $248,276 to cover personnel costs. I move approval of a temporary all alcohol beverages non-sales license to Salam Kiflam, doing business as the Lars Anderson Auto Museum, for a holiday party to be held on December 14th, 2022 from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. 75 people are expected to attend. I also move approving a temporary all alcohol beverage sales license to Rebecca Hall, doing business as the Lars Anderson Auto Museum, for a holiday party to be held on December 16th, 2022 from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. 65 people expected to attend. And finally, I move approval of the application for a change in doing business as from Edmund and Company, LLC, doing business as Drink Me, to Edmund and Company, LLC, doing business as Ismai's Cafe at 1298 Beacon Street. All those in favor? Bernard, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the 911 enhanced 911 system is something that I don't think a lot of people really are aware of, but it does include or it does entail a significant change from what most people think of as 911, and it gives the dispatch office the ability to send text, receive text, video messages, etc., and more accurately pinpoint from where a call is made. So I know that some people may be a little uncomfortable with that, but that is just how in this modern world we take 911 calls. I mean, not we, but they take 911 calls, and are able to track where the incident is, so that help can get to them quickly. So
Yes, very important. People are visual, so if they know what they're looking for, and sometimes it's not as straightforward as an address. You know, there are many floors to some buildings, hard to find apartments. So this is well worth it. So I will move the miscellaneous. All those in favor? Bernard?
aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Mike?
Aye, that work?
Yes, yes, that did. And the chair votes aye. Okay, first, our regular calendar is an entertainment license change. Is it Nasib? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, it's Nasib. Yep.
Oh, great, excellent. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're before us tonight?
Yeah, sure. My name is Nasib Lutfi. I'm part owner manager at Temptations Cafe in Coolidge Corner. I'm here hoping to upgrade our entertainment license. I'm not exactly sure what it currently is, but we're hoping maybe to get a license to play live music, especially jazz music. This has been, in talks for the past few months. We would like to try something like that and see if it works, maybe from the hours of 7 to 11, and then like 2 or 3 days a week.
Excellent, very succinct. I appreciate that. Bernard?
Yeah, I was wondering if there are residences above your building, and if so, what type of measures are you taking to ensure that the music doesn't sort of filter into their areas?
Sure, yeah. So we have, I think there's this tool that we can use to keep, the volume to a minimum. The residents, it's mostly office buildings, and most of those guys head home around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It's like therapist offices, dental offices.
Okay.
So I think they close on the earlier side. I could be wrong. Maybe some offices stay open later, but we've never gotten a complaint. We have music playing at the moment, but we've never gotten a complaint from the upstairs offices about anything like that.
I didn't realize that they were offices. I thought that maybe
Yep.
there were buildings there. Okay.
Hmm.
Most of that block is commercial only. Any other questions? I'm inclined to approve this request. It's very hard to find live music in Brookline, so I'm game to experiment.
So
I think the hours are reasonable.
sorry to interrupt. This came from a girl that currently works at the cafe. She's a Berkeley student. She's a jazz musician, and she mentioned it, and she has a jazz band, and she thought it would be a great idea. And again, there isn't much around that area jazz music wise. I figured it might be a good for the community. Maybe people want to come hang out, drink coffee. We're thinking about maybe just shutting the kitchen area down and just having coffees and pastries served during that time.
Great.
Mhm.
Miriam?
Yeah, I'm just having flashbacks of my youth. So
Mhm.
drinking coffee and listening to live music, it just seems to be something that doesn't happen that much anymore. I'm a fan, and I hope we get an invite to the opening.
Sounds good. Absolutely.
Excellent.
What-
Any other questions? Mike?
I just wonder if there's anybody else here who's old enough to remember the Mount Auburn Club 97 in Cambridge, or 47 rather, in Cambridge, 47 Mount Auburn Street in Cambridge, where there was live bluegrass for years, and
That's awesome.
coffee for $1.
Hmm.
Oh, my first band played the All Asia Cafe in Central Square. All ages.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good.
Well, hopefully this will be a draw.
Yeah, I'm hoping to bring more people to that side of the street and just maybe just hang out if there's nothing else to do on a Wednesday night or a Friday night or Saturday night.
Excellent. Well, let's see how it goes. But first, we have to make it official.
Mhm.
So I will move approving the amendment to an entertainment license for Temptation Cafe, doing business as Temptation Cafe, for live entertainment consisting of instruments, bass, upright, and electric keyboard, guitar, and saxophone, and vocalist on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 1350 Beacon Street. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
I'm going to vote aye, but I just want to say to Naseeb, I'm not sure he caught it, but our town administrator dropped a very obvious hint there that he should be invited to play.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the idea, is to rotate some bands and, you know, hopefully get something going. Yeah, you're more than welcome to play.
I like the way he said, my first band. There apparently have been many of them. Anyway, aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so John, that was an aye. Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Best of luck, and do let us know when.
Thank you.
have-
Yeah, absolutely. I will.
performance.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Excellent. So before we move to our next agenda item, I believe that we have Representative Vitolo with us now, and I promised that we would take him once he joined.
Good evening.
Hello?
Good evening. Your 3 minutes will begin.
I apologize. My daughter got out of school and my wife got back from New York City, and this was happening all at the same time, and we did the best we could. My name is Tommy Vitolo. I am Brookline's state representative. For those who can't see, this is my telephone number, 617-872-8921. And my email, of course, is tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. I represent the 15th Norfolk District, North Brookline, but as I am the only legislator in the Great and General.
Okay, so that's not just me.
No, it's not just you.
Okay.
Tommy, you're frozen.
We'll just give it a second.
You know, his last word was court.
Very good.
Remember
Perhaps he's,
that word.
Both a noun and a verb.
well, he's obviously had the cork put back in.
Okay, I'll text him. Have to make sure that I use the appropriate your conjunction. Okay. While he sorts that out, let's move on to linkage fee. Victor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, can I share my screen?
Yes, of course.
All right, my name is Victor Panak. I'm an economic development and long-term planner with the town's Planning and Community Development Department. I'm here tonight to introduce the concept of a possible commercial linkage fee program for the town and request that the select board support proceeding with the Nexus study, which I'll explain what that is in a second. And also support using housing trust funds to fund that Nexus study. So I'll get started. So I started researching this topic back in August, but it's been percolating kind of in the background and been championed by a few people now for a couple of years. And so I'll start off with what is a linkage fee. So a linkage fee is imposed on non-residential developments for the purpose of supporting affordable housing. And in some of the communities in Massachusetts, they also are used to support job training programs. The fees are levied on a certain dollar amount per square foot. And some linkage fees programs can include a threshold square footage, which is the minimum square footage that a development has to have to be subject to the linkage fee requirements. Some linkage fee programs have variable rates for different uses, and some have variable rates for different locations. Some have variable rates for different size developments. There's a few other sort of things that programs have that are different from other programs. Just wanted to cover this big question very quickly, why the Economic Division and long-term, or Economic Development and Long-Term Planning Division feels that a linkage fee program is good right now. We think that it's a good time for Brookline to start looking into this because we anticipate some new non-residential developments in the next 5 to 10 years, like 10 Brookline Place and Chestnut Hill West, that a linkage fee could apply to and have a significant impact. The first thing I want to cover is what I'm calling the legal question. So linkage fees are a type of impact fee, and because of that, they have some legal implications and concerns. Impact fees, and I'm talking on a national level here, they're widely used in other states, but rarely used in Massachusetts, and they rest on some legally controversial ground. The bottom line is that there are 2 legal tests that have to be passed for an impact fee to survive a legal challenge. The first test comes from a court case called Nolan versus California Coastal Commission. And that case states that a rational nexus has to be established by the municipality between the adverse impacts of the development and the exaction that the impact fee is aimed at. The second test is from Dolan versus Tigard, which is called the roughly proportional test. And that essentially states that the exaction, aka the fee, has to be roughly proportional to the impact. So to address these legal tests, municipalities produce nexus studies, and in Massachusetts, home rule petitions. The nexus studies, which I will go into more detail in a minute, directly address the 2 legal tests that I just went over, and then home rule petitions provide the municipalities with just another level of authority that strengthens their legal standing and their linkage fee programs. All right, so the first step to getting a linkage fee program on the books is to engage in a nexus study. So as I mentioned, the nexus study addresses those 2 key legal questions. They demonstrate the connection between commercial development and housing availability or affordability, which is the rational nexus issue. And then they also provide a calculation of what the appropriate fee would be to cover that impact from commercial development on housing availability and affordability. They also provide a couple other great practical purposes that I want to highlight here. They provide the town an opportunity to study its recent development patterns and upcoming development opportunities. They provide an understanding of how the town's housing needs are affected by new non-residential developments. They provide us a glimpse into the intentions of large developers in the coming years. They help answer some key questions about the parameters of a linkage fee program. And they dovetail quite nicely with the research and work of comprehensive planning, which the town is gearing up to work on as well. Nexus studies are also almost always produced by municipalities interested in adopting linkage fee programs. They're not legally required, but as I've gone over at this point, they are highly recommended to bolster the legal standing for a linkage fee program. And the results of nexus studies are typically included in the home rule petition package, although that's not necessarily always the case. All right, so I'm just going to go over a few of the linkage fee or the components of a linkage fee program. The first and foremost is the rate. The linkage fee rate is typically set at a certain dollar per square foot, but the rate can also vary for different uses, locations, different size buildings, though variable rates can introduce some very undesirable complexities into linkage fee programs and are typically not used. The threshold, which is actually a very common component of linkage fee programs, is the square footage below which a building or project would not be subject to linkage fees at all. There isn't necessarily a philosophical reason for having a threshold, but there is a political reason, and that's to avoid having linkage fees negatively impact small businesses and low scale developments that often harbor those small businesses. I've already talked about variable rates a little bit. And then the last component is the allocation of funds. So as an impact fee, the town could theoretically allocate the fees to almost anything for which a rational nexus can be enumerated. But the intention for this proposal is that the funds we would collect would be used to support affordable housing. Other communities around Boston also use them very commonly for job training programs. And in other states, impact fees sort of more generally are used for to support schools, water and sewer, all sorts of other municipal purposes. But those other things beyond housing and jobs training are limited generally to states outside of Massachusetts. I have yet to find an impact fee program in Massachusetts that has passed legal challenge that supports those other municipal purposes. So all these elements of a linkage fee program would be discussed in a nexus study and then decided on by the municipality as part of the process. So why support linkage fee programs? The first, maybe most obvious, is that linkage fees are a predictable and justifiable system for collecting money to support affordable housing. Predictability for the town is nice, but the predictability and the ease of use for developers might be even better. The mere simplicity of the program and calculation of the fees would help developers when compared to a more drawn out negotiation process that we currently engage in with large developments. And so it reduces the investment of time and energy in negotiation and allows developers to reallocate those resources to other elements of the development process that might end up being more beneficial for the town. Linkage fees are also a potentially very significant source of funds for the town. So I'm just going to give some examples here. Since 1990, Boston, which has had a linkage fee program for a very long time, has collected roughly $6 million annually. And Cambridge, since 2015, when they recently updated their linkage fee program, has collected about $6.4 million annually. Now, obviously, Boston and Cambridge experienced significantly more non-residential growth in Brookline, so we won't be collecting anywhere near those numbers. But as a more close to home example, if the town had a very modest linkage fee at the time, the Hilton Garden Inn would have yielded about $1.2 million, and the non-residential portion of the Waldo Durgan project would have yielded about $1.5 million. And the last point, of course, is that a linkage fee program can be supported on the very simple grounds that it simply makes sense. Non-residential developments do attract new workers of varying income levels to the community, and therefore they do have an impact on housing availability and affordability in the region, if not Brookline itself. So much like we extract the contribution from large residential developments through our inclusionary zoning bylaw, it's fairly reasonable to collect a similar contribution from large non-residential developments for the same purpose. All right, so now this is an overview of the process, and the following slides are going to go into more detail on each step. So the first step would be to establish a staff working group that would include some EDAB members and HAB members, as well as members of town council and 2 or 3 planning staff. I've already given this presentation to EDAB and HAB, and both boards are unanimously in support of moving forward with the Nexus study. EDAB has volunteered 3 members of EDAB have volunteered to join the working group, and 2 members of HAB have volunteered to join the working group as well. The next step would be for us to conduct a Nexus study. That would be conducted by a consultant over the course of the first half of 2023. The third step would be to go to town meeting with a home rule petition package crafted by the working group with the help of the Nexus study consultant. If town meeting were to approve that home rule petition, it would go to the state. And then after, in the fourth step, once the state were to approve our whole home rule petition, hopefully, the town would then have to, or town meeting would then have to adopt an official linkage fee bylaw. So the first step, as I said, I already presented to EDAB and HAB, and they're supportive. HAB also specifically supported the use of housing trust funds for the Nexus study. So I have members for a working group. The working group would act as a point of contact with the Nexus study consultant. And the reason I point that out specifically is because the Nexus study consultant, well, in my conversations with potential consultants, they said that they would want to periodically touch base with the town at each of the steps of the Nexus study to review the findings up until that point. So having one point of contact on the town side makes the process more efficient, reduces the amount of time it takes to go through the Nexus study, and the number of meetings that the consultant would have to be involved in, thereby reducing the cost of the study itself. The intention is that the members of EDAP and HAB on the staff working group would report back to their respective boards, allowing the ongoing activities of the working group to be accessible to the public generally. I think I already went through the composition of the working group, but it's a mix of staff, EDAB, and HAB members, as well as town council. And then, tonight, I'm requesting that the select board support moving forward with a working group and a Nexus study. And once an RFP has been drafted and a consultant identified, hopefully by February, I would return to the select board with the exact cost of the Nexus study for the select board's official vote, allowing the use of housing trust funds. So that's kind of this next step. It's the beginning of the Nexus study process. We would issue an RFP. I would come back to the select board with the exact budget. And then the timeline for the Nexus study is roughly 5 to 6 months. At the conclusion or near the conclusion of the Nexus study process, the working group would start to discuss the parameters of the town's linkage fee program. And those parameters would be included in a home rule petition package that would go to town meeting, hopefully in the fall of 2023. So that's the part one, town meeting part one. EDAB, HAB, and select board would all work to finalize that home rule petition, and the select board would file it as the petitioners to town meeting. Once town meeting approves the home rule petition, it would go off to the legislature near the end of 2023, and probably with the legislature through 2024. And hopefully by the fall of 2024, we would be able to bring an official linkage fee bylaw back to town meeting for a final approval. I've touched on this a little bit. I presented at HAB or at EDAB on November 7th. They were unanimously supportive of moving forward. I presented at HAB on November 30th. They were also unanimously supportive of moving forward and using housing trust funds for the Nexus study. And tonight I'm in front of the select board. This is just a spreadsheet of municipalities around Boston that have existing linkage fee programs. I don't think there's anything major to highlight here. I just included it in the presentation for reference. Everett's probably interesting because they have a varying fee based on the size of the development. None of the other communities have that. So that's sort of interesting. And Cambridge has an extremely high linkage fee that they raised probably within the last month or so. And that's all I have.
Nope, you're muted, sorry.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Any questions from select board members? I think I see Bernard and then Miriam and then John. Bernard, you'll have to unmute as well.
Devin, who muted me? Okay, I guess I have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure how I can organize them in a easy to understand way. But let me just start with one. You said that the consultant would not present to the select board on a regular basis as they go through the steps of their study, but only EDAB and HAB. My position is that they have to present to us because this idea raises so many issues that raises issues that the select board really needs to be attuned to. That's one thing. And the other thing, I'll just limit it to 2 questions or 2 points. In the slide deck, it seemed to suggest that Brookline is very much like a bunch of other communities, Cambridge, Boston, as well as some others. Cambridge and Boston, of course, have completely different demand for non-residential space, commercial space than Brookline. And I just, think that we have to be careful about, how close we are to other communities like them and whether this is going to work for us in the way that we wanted to. And in that regard, if we're going to go forward with this, I would sort of suggest some threshold that protects small business because, that is the main commercial driver in this town. 10 Brookline Place is sort of an outlier, and some of the others. So I think we have to be very careful moving forward on this. I'm not sure that it's necessarily a great idea. So,
Miriam?
Can I make a few
do you
points
wanna-
just
okay.
very quickly? So yeah, thresholds are almost always included in linkage fee programs. So I think that would be included in ours. The differences between Brookline and Cambridge and Boston and Somerville are absolutely true. I brought up those communities in my presentation merely to show what they have collected in their linkage fee programs. And also, unfortunately, they're the only communities in Massachusetts that have linkage fee programs. We don't have extremely good comparisons for Brookline. Maybe Watertown or Everett are the closest, but only sort of these cities have linkage fee programs. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say there.
Before you start, Miriam, I'm just gonna leapfrog over you to see what Chaz might have to add.
Sure. No, I wanted to add on to Victor's comment there. That's right. We are clearly very different from Cambridge, Somerville. I would say we're quite different from Everett and Watertown too. Developments there. I think the idea here in bringing on a consultant for a relatively nominal fee that's paid for out of a specific fund to investigate this idea and figure out what if any, that level should be is really important. I think, Bernard, one of the things that you've often said is there's that missing middle in Brookline, and that's also true in our commercial development, right? We have small businesses that we don't want to have impacted by over-regulation or over taxation, and then we have large businesses too, and large scale commercial development that is outsized when compared to some of the other commercial developments in town. And so thinking through how we could creatively build out a process that is Brookline specific is why I think Victor is talking about developing a process to figure that out rather than just saying, well, we should do what Cambridge is doing. Certainly, I think, the Cambridge's number, as Victor pointed out, is eye-popping, over $30 a square foot. That's not what Brookline can sustain. But we need to think through what we could potentially sustain and whether a model like Everett's with a sliding scale or with a higher cap, as you pointed, or a higher floor, as you pointed out, before it even triggers is important.
And engaging in a nexus study would not lock the town into having a linkage fee program. It's really sort of a study. There's no predetermined outcome. And that's why I kind of highlighted the fact that the study has other practical benefits for the town, aside from investigating a linkage fee program. It does allow us to gather in one place and analyze some data that's useful to us for comprehensive planning, but just planning in general in terms of our economic and commercial development in the future.
Speaking of the woman who likes data, Miriam. You'll have to unmute.
Thank you. So I missed some of what Chaz said, and my apologies because of my internet, but I think that first I want to say I love this idea. In fact, I would say one of the differences in Brookline is in fact that we have a lot less commercial property, and therefore we actually get a lot less taxes from the commercial property. So I think this is a nice way to kind of help us in that sense, because I think the fact that we have a lot less commercial property to tax does in fact affect our tax base. So I also love the idea that, of course, it addresses a need in affordable housing. I think it's very important to do this study. My question is, and you kind of already answered it a little bit, and Heather alluded to it with the data, is we're in the middle of a big housing production plan. And so I wonder how this study rolls into that at all, what the intersections are. Will any parts of this Nexus consultation report be able to contribute to the housing production plan, et cetera? If or not, right? But it feels like to me, whenever you're doing a data dive, that there's always value in a way you didn't see it.
Yeah, there might be shared data. We haven't explicitly talked about any ways that the two projects overlap. But yeah, in terms of data, anything that's useful from one thing to the next, we pass it on if we can.
John?
It's up to the chair, but I wonder if before I ask my question, we should go back to Representative Vitolo. I just don't know what his schedule looks like tonight. So your call.
I'm perfectly happy to wait till the end of this important conversation.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
That's great. So there's so many ways to react to the excellent presentation that Victor just gave. One way would be to say, gosh, I wish we could turn back the clock and, and get that money that we didn't get because we didn't have a linkage fee. But I think just asking that question forces you to sort of consider the implications of all of this. What you get tends to be a negotiated figure. And if you negotiate a linkage fee, you might have to give up on something else you wanted to negotiate. But, that's not to say we shouldn't do linkage fees. And one of the things about linkage fees that I think makes them attractive is, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that they allow you to raise revenue over and above what you raise under the 2.5% cap. So, we need to take advantage of those opportunities when we can. But the last thing I'm going to say, just because I try to sort of ask every time I hear something that sounds as good as this, what would be the downside possibly of this? I'm not sure I can name a downside, but I do think it's worth asking ourselves if we were to choose between this method of getting more money from our commercial tax base or going higher in the shift. Yes, going higher in the shift doesn't sort of it puts more of the burden on the commercial tax base, a little bit more of the burden on the commercial tax base. It doesn't necessarily get you more money under 2.5. You're still capped under 2.5, but it does represent a wider sharing, a burden sharing that isn't just on the backs of developers that want to develop something new. And we desperately need new development in the town. And the only reason I could think of to not vote for this would be if we thought it was going to discourage even further initiatives to develop new properties in the town. End of speech.
Mike?
Those are all very interesting points, and for once, I waited until the end to comment. Um, and the one thing I would say is that it's difficult. It's difficult to build in Brookline. We have a zoning ordinance that has accumulated layers, sort of like the sedimentary rock of the Grand Canyon. And what I would suggest is that if we do this, the consultant take a look at that and see whether there are any barriers that could be removed, I hate to use the word shortcuts, but I'm going to use that word anyway, any shortcuts that could be given in exchange for imposing this. We are hopefully headed, we're going to do a comprehensive plan. We're hopefully headed towards rewriting zoning, but that's a very long-term process. And if we're done with that in 5 years, we'll be lucky. But in the meantime, it seems to me like that should be part of the conversation about this.
My own thoughts, I am favorable to this idea. I like it because at its core, linkage kind of directly assigns a cost to kind of the externalities that happen once a development like this goes in place. So, for instance, let's say that somebody had developed a property that plugs right into Route 9. We would then negotiate for the roadway improvements and maybe sidewalk improvements and what have you to link into the municipal services that development would probably put on the public infrastructure. My only frustration, and actually it's an opportunity, but right now it's a frustration, is that we have a lot of commercial property that is right on transit. And I find it very frustrating, and I'm going to use this opportunity because we have a state legislator right here. I find it very frustrating that I can't negotiate linkage fees that would then go to the T, because I could see a lot of people, coming in wanting to develop right on, the T, and we could improve the roadway, but what I really want is to improve the transit user experience. So anything that could be done, anything that could be studied about what barrier needs to be removed in order to allow that to happen, I think would be very, very important, not just for Brookline, but potentially for other communities that are MBTA communities.
I've been recently looking into, I'm not remotely an expert on this, but impact fees in other states. And why, the question, why do Massachusetts communities not have impact fees for things other than housing is constantly sort of eating at me. And the only thing I can figure out is that when it's been tried in Massachusetts, it's been challenged legally and ending up unsuccessful. The ordinances or the bylaws are struck. Whereas in other states, the legislatures have explicitly approved and allowed communities to impose impact fees for any number of purposes. So to have something like that, I think the Massachusetts legislature would have to move forward with explicitly allowing them in state statute.
I suppose I'll take this conversation offline to understand what Tommy sees as potential barriers, but man, oh man, come on. It seems like common sense to me, but I don't work at the State House. So, any other comments or questions about this fantastic presentation? Are we ready to vote on this tonight? We know where the money is coming from. The money is actually available. So
Heather, can I just clarify? I wasn't necessarily looking for a vote, but you can vote. I will have to come back when I have a clearer number. for what the amount from the Housing Trust Fund is. Right now, I know that it will be about $50,000, but we have to issue an RFP, we have to get a consultant, write up a contract, and get an exact number, and I'll have to return at that point. Tonight, I'm just looking for confirmation from the select board that they are comfortable with me moving forward with this Nexus study, so that I don't spend 6 months doing the Nexus study only to come back and have the select board say they don't want to champion this at town meeting.
That is wise. Bernard?
Yeah, okay, where does the consultant come in? I mean, you're doing the Nexus study, but where does the consultant come in?
The consultant does the Nexus study, and they
Okay.
check in with the staff working group that is composed of staff plus EDAB and HAB members.
Okay. My only concern is that I want to make clear that as the consultant checks in with EDAB and HAB on a periodic basis, they also check in with the select board. And that's bottom line for me.
Fair. That is an important part of why the select board now has a seat on the HAB. Miriam?
I was actually just going to ask who the select board member is representing the HAB.
I am.
Oh, you are. I mean, because the other option would be to just make sure there's a select board member in the working group, and then that select board member can keep the rest of us appraised of what's happening. Seems to me that might be more efficient.
Yeah, I'm not really answering Bernard directly right now because I'm sort of thinking of a few options. I mean, the consultant could come and report to the select board periodically. That would probably end up adding a cost to the consultant. So the study would cost a little more than expected. We could also have members of the working group themselves come and report to the select board periodically, or we could add a member of the select board to the working group.
So if we
I'm-
are not voting tonight, let's continue this conversation offline, but Mike has his hand up.
I was just going to say we're overthinking this. Let's just let Victor do the rest of his homework. I think you can hear that there's basically pretty strong support for this idea, and if you can meet the questions and the Bernard's question, for example, in some fashion, that would be great.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much for this presentation. It will be very exciting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Very welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for pursuing this.
So sorry to keep you waiting, Representative Vitolo.
Not at all. I'm just glad to hear that presentation. Is this better? Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Remarkably, the solution was to unplug my computer from the Ethernet cable and just use Wi-Fi. And I cannot explain why that's better at this moment, but it is. So again, I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. My telephone number is still 617-872-8921. My email remains tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. And I represent the 15th Norfolk District, which is North Brookline. But of course, I carry the opportunities and challenges of all of Brookline every day in the legislature. I'm speaking really to two audiences. I'm speaking to you, this august body, but also to the public. And so forgive me if some of the things I'm saying are really for the other group, but I think it's complex enough that it's worth saying some things out loud that I know the people on my Zoom screen already know. You'll recall in November of 2019, the Brookline Town Meeting passed warrant article 21, which was the fossil fuel free warrant article, and it passed overwhelmingly, nearly unanimously. And it restricted the installation of fossil fuel infrastructure inside new and deeply renovated buildings to essentially prohibit the use of fossil fuel for heating space or hot water. It still allowed cooking, and there were some important exemptions. Nevertheless, about 6 months later, in June, the Attorney General's office ruled that warrant article 21 was inconsistent with the Massachusetts general law in 3 different places, including some language that was written in like the 1940s. Nevertheless, that meant that the warrant article could not go into effect. In late June of 2020, I and Representative Kay Khan of Newton filed an amendment to the House Roadmap Climate Bill that called for a municipal opt-in specialized stretch energy code to be promulgated by the state. And the idea was to have a more aggressive, from a fighting climate change perspective, building code than the stretch energy code, which is code that this municipality, Brookline, adopted way back in 2008, championed by Werner Lowy, then and still a town meeting member from Precinct 13. The language that Representative Khan and I drafted was ultimately included in the law and signed into law in March of 2021. And that gave the Department of Energy Resources, the DOER, 18 months to work with BBRS, who writes the state building codes, to develop the specialized stretch energy code, a building code more aggressive than the stretch code. And that's exactly what DOER did. They worked with developers of skyscrapers and single-family homes and apartment buildings and hospitals and universities. They worked with property managers. They worked with engineers and architects. They worked with the entirety of the community that is responsible for designing, building, operating the built environment. Building trades, I would add, is another set of organizations that DOER worked with. And they promulgated the specialized stretch energy code in late 2022, just a few months ago. And in doing so, they set forth the next step in the process, which is that individual municipalities may opt in through their legislative branch, through their town meeting or their city council, to adopt the specialized stretch energy code, which would install more stringent requirements with respect to energy use in new construction and deep renovation. So this does not reach into existing homes and require any changes. This is about new construction. DOER has asked three things from municipalities in adopting the specialized stretch energy code. Number one, that you only make it official on January 1st or July 1st of a calendar year, so that developers have some consistency in when they should expect to be compliant. Number two, that a municipality pass the legislation about 6 months before it goes into effect, so that architects and engineers have an opportunity to make sure they're designing to the upcoming standard. And number three, that you use language DOER drafts in your warrant. They very carefully drafted the language to make sure that when cities or towns pass it, there's no question about what it means, and it can go into effect, and the Attorney General won't have any trouble. The third one is straightforward. They've created that language. I'm happy to share it with you. I believe my office sent it to the town administrator today. I'm sure he can pass it along. But the other two, the go into effect on July 1 or January 1 of a calendar year and the 6-month lead time, mean if we want the specialized stretch energy code to apply to Brookline in 2023, we have to go to town meeting with this in January of 2023. That's next month. We can certainly do that consistent with state law. There's two paths, of course. My preferred path is that the select board lead the town on this and call for the town meeting. It's not the only way to do it, though, of course. And what I'm imagining is a one-night virtual, one warrant article town meeting. Now, because the specialized stretch energy code, just like the stretch energy code that we passed in 2008, is an all or nothing proposition. Municipalities cannot tweak it, cannot change it, cannot adjust it. You either say yes or you say nothing, and you continue with your life without it. I don't actually imagine that the vote flow chart for town meeting is especially complex. Town meeting either votes to adopt it or it doesn't. The specialized stretch energy code is not as aggressive as the fossil fuel free warrant article that our town meeting passed in November 2019. It is not as aggressive as where town meeting was on this very issue 2 years ago. And so I feel quite confident that town meeting will find this level of expectation on new construction acceptable. Furthermore, because this went through the state, it had a full hearing. In fact, over a dozen hearings from all of the interested parties on construction and development. And so I'm confident that the actual code that was developed by GOER in consultation with BBRS is appropriate with respect to creating buildings that meet health and safety standards, that meet cost appropriate standards, that are operational. The state has made sure it has met those marks. In fact, remember, we're talking about the Baker administration, a Republican pro-business administration. I am not worried that they overstepped and made the regulations too severe on developers. I fear that they're not severe enough. Nevertheless, they are more stringent than what we have now. And therefore, I believe it is appropriate for our select board to push forward and lead town meeting to the next step in decarbonizing our built environment by proposing that we adopt the specialized stretch energy code in a town meeting in January 2023. Of course, I am fully available to work with the select board, the advisory committee, any other town committees and boards on both the legislative aspect and the engineering aspect. As you might imagine, I've been very involved with this legislation for the past several years. After all, I wrote it. I also want to make sure we understand that this is not the 10 towns law that was passed just a few months ago and will not go into effect, I'm guessing, for about 18 months. That is likely a further step than the specialized stretch energy code. The specialized stretch energy code is a step on the journey. It is not our first and it won't be our last, but it is the next one to take. And the sooner we take it, the sooner we're moving our built environment in the right direction. Finally, I would point out that Brookline's warrant article 2020, Article 21 in the year 2019 was put Brookline in a leadership position on the entire East Coast. In fact, there were only a few communities in California who had tried what we tried. I hope that Brookline chooses to maintain its leadership position on this issue. I know that there are other communities who will have this warrant article on their spring town meeting to go into effect in 2024. I am hopeful that Brookline chooses to remain the leader, providing moral clarity on this issue, and that we go ahead and push forward on this legislation that was born out of a Brookline request just 2 years ago. Happy to answer any questions now or later.
Well, it is public comment. So, but any questions from board members? Bernard.
So when are we planning to put this on the agenda for a vote?
As early
Probably
as Thursday.
Okay, this Thursday?
Yes,
Mhm.
during your budget summit, or it could be next Tuesday.
And the reason for 2023 as opposed to 2024 is just to be in the lead, or is there?
When we have opportunities to use well-designed tools to combat climate change in a meaningful way, there's no reason for delay.
Mike.
Yeah, and there's also there's an advantage. The legislative session runs for 2 years. You want to get this in early in the session. And I'm sure that's a piece of Tommy's thinking.
To be clear, no.
Okay.
Board Member Sandman, it is already state law. It is not a home rule. And that's why I'm able to speak out about it now, rather than take my home rule approach of staying mum until the town decides. It is already state law, and municipalities can simply vote by town meeting to have that apply to the town. No more state action is needed. The state is out ahead.
So once we go through town meeting in January, whatever, with our single vote, and I'll be very interested to see if we can turn that into a multi-night meeting with just one item on the agenda. We're there.
That's right. And the regulations are fully promulgated. Everyone will be able to see exactly
Got it.
what the building code
Yeah.
would be.
All right.
Of course, we will talk about this in further detail on Thursday. It has already been noticed. John?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Representative Vitolo. And I'm just going to say, town meeting member Sean Lynn Jones pointed out something to other town meeting members earlier today. I'm just going to cite it, and that is that Brookline adopted some through town meeting adopted some tobacco regulation a couple of years ago, and just today we learned that New Zealand has, according to the headlines, become the first in the world to do this pioneering approach to banning tobacco sales, not immediately, but eventually over time, and New Zealand will reach the day when tobacco sales are banned. Brookline actually initiated the very approach that New Zealand is now taking a couple of years ago. I'm not saying New Zealand's taking it because Brookline initiated it, but it makes me feel proud. As I say, I confess to a little bit of hometown pride here, to know that something of that nature that is going to be of benefit to global health was initiated. Brookline was very early in adopting it. And I think this is just another example. Brookline, through Representative Vitolo and through the efforts of others, has been somewhat in the forefront on these efforts. I'm being modest. I think we've actually been very much in the forefront on these efforts. And I would like to keep that momentum going. If I thought there were any reasons to hesitate in this instance, I would say, sure, let's hesitate because this needs a closer look. As Representative Vitolo has just pointed out, this actually doesn't go quite as far as Brookline has already gone through the initiative of town meeting in its impact. And I think it's a good measure. And if we can start it in 2023, I think we should.
Chaz?
Yeah, I just want to briefly talk about logistics here, if the select board decides to move forward on this, and particularly to just get this into the public consciousness early. If you do move forward on having a special town meeting for one night in January, it will probably be early January. I know that there are going to be a number of committees in town that are going to want to weigh in on this, even though, as Representative Vitolo said, the language is done, it cannot be altered, or the state won't accept it. I still think there's going to be, as John said, this sort of sense of hometown pride, and also a need to kind of kick the tires and ensure that in a truncated process, everyone has had a chance to read and opine on this. I'm going to take point on the collected report on this. On the combined reports on this, because of the short turnaround time and because we are concurrently doing this, if this moves forward in conjunction with budget season, and a significant crunch on the collective bargaining side. So town staff resources are pretty strained at this point, but we are going to make this work, and I'm going to take point to make sure that happens. But I would ask of members of the public, particularly folks who serve on boards and committees that might want to take this up, is to coordinate with your fellow board members, not just on your own boards and committees, but your other board members and committees who are going to want to have a conversation on this. Let's try to combine hearings. Let's try and have as few hearings as possible so that staff can come 1 or 2 nights, not 5 or 6 nights. And we can all get together. You can ask all your questions as one. And then I will handle on my end putting everything together for you in the combined reports. So if you have logistical questions or if you want to deal with scheduling, please talk to me. And that is, again, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. The select board has to debate and decide this, but I want to get this idea into people's heads early because of the truncated schedule. If this goes forward, let's be efficient in our time and our use of staff time to ensure that you, members of the committees who do important work, are able to kick the tires on this, but also that staff are not then over the holidays running to 7 different meetings. So really appreciate that. Thank you.
I will definitely talk to Dennis Dowdy of the AC so that we can maybe try to coordinate. Miriam.
Thank you. I think John's remarks were right. It's great to be cutting edge. I appreciate that we're cutting edge, especially in public health, especially in climate change. But he did say something that I want to riff off of, which is he said, if there any reason to hesitate in this instance, I do think there's a reason to hesitate. And that's just, I just don't understand why we can't vote on this in May. And my hesitation isn't, well, it's a little personal. I think we're all a little burnout with town meeting, but I think really I look at all the work that has to happen on the back end for this to happen during budget season, for one very important, but one warrant article that I just don't see. It's not clear to me yet why we can't wait to May. So I would appreciate getting more clarity on that, because it really is a lot to ask of staff, you know, in the middle of budget season. And frankly, town meeting, well, I think after how many nights? I don't even know, 8 nights, 7 nights, some ungodly number of nights, 8 nights. It's, you know, for those of us with families, for those of us with our other obligations, I just think we need to really understand why we're having this now versus May.
Tommy, are you frozen again?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Miriam.
So we will talk further on Thursday as a group. Since this hasn't been noticed for this meeting, I hesitate to do too much more discussion. So we also need to move on because we have publicly posted public hearings that start in 2 minutes, and we still have an agenda item that we should get to before that even happens. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your time. As you know, success has many parents, failure is an orphan. And I'm very hopeful that the success of this specialized stretch energy code sooner, not later, so that we get the benefits of fighting climate change sooner, not later, will have the parents include the 5 members of the select board and the town administrator. So thanks so much.
Bernard, your hand.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to make the point that Miriam was making, but I think we do need an answer, because we have to give 6 months advance warning or whatever. And I'm not sure why that requires us to have town meeting in January as opposed to May. I mean, am I missing something? Maybe I don't count well.
So so the short answer is you could theoretically, you could do either, right? You could, the concern I think the representative has is that if you pass something in May, it has AG review involved, and the AG's review might not be effective before the July 1st date.
No, to be more clear, to be more clear, if we pass it in May, DOER stipulates that it cannot be effective until January 1st, 2024. We would have to wait 6 more months.
Representative, again, this is where I think maybe when we should have this conversation when it was noticed, because I disagree with that. DOER's recommendation is that you give 6 months notice. It's my understanding that 6 months notice could be satisfied by the select board saying they agree to take it up in May. But the reality of the situation that you brought up, which is a legitimate concern, is that the AG might not finalize this by July 1st. And therefore, a warrant article that's passed in May that says effective date July 1st, or whenever the AG says it's okay, doesn't actually start on July 1st. It starts on a date that doer doesn't want it to start, which then pushes it out into January. But the actual notice is a recommendation, not a requirement. That's my understanding. And obviously, this is something that we can talk about on Thursday when it was noticed.
Yes, I really am uncomfortable going too much further into this discussion since it was not noticed. And we have noticed it for Thursday. So let's do that so that we are all on the same page. Mike?
I'm sorry, the only thing I'm concerned about is that, well, there are 2 things really, but what I'm concerned about is that on Thursday, we have a relatively limited time to think about budget priorities and, you know, what are we doing? It feeds into a consideration of where we're going with an operating override and so forth. I don't want to take an hour doing this on Thursday. I think that would be a terrible misuse of our time.
I will make sure that we are not talking about this for an hour,
Thank you.
Good luck
but
with
we are
that.
not going to talk any further
Not worried
about it
about you.
tonight since it was not noticed.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to move on. Thank you so much, Representative Vitolo. And going back to our actually posted agenda, we have the recommendation for final commitment for 108 Center Street project.
Thank you, Heather. Well, I'll start things off. I'm Roger Blood, here this evening, speaking on behalf of the Housing Advisory Board, as the members of which are the trustees for the town's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we're very happy to be back before you tonight. You may recall, a little over 2 years ago, we came in the early stages for the proposal by Hebrew Senior Life to develop their site at 108 Center Street as a new project for senior housing with 54 affordable housing units. And at that time, the original preliminary ask from the town's funding was for 3.375 million. And let me just note parenthetically, the memorandum you have in front of you has a typo in it. It says 3.725, but the numbers won't add up unless you use 3.375. So we've been working, both the HAB and the Housing Division staff, and as you can see, Joe Viola, who has Housing Division now, is with us tonight. Since the fall of 2021 with the Hebrew Senior Life Development Team. And what probably won't surprise any of you is that costs as well as interest rates have risen unusually fast and considerably over recent months, and no surprise to the HAB when we've seen final numbers coming in higher, never lower than originally projected. So the recommendation that we're bringing for you tonight, and you have the detail again in front of you, is for the town to provide through a combination of housing trust funds, as well as the federal funds that we have some control over through the HOME program and the CDBG, for a total of $4.05 million, an increase of $675,000 since the original 2021 ask, most of which is attributable to higher interest rates and higher construction costs that the Hebrew Senior Life team will be sharing with you in a little bit more detail shortly. So this is a great project. Those of you that are familiar with the location, it just couldn't be better for affordable housing, and especially for senior affordable housing. So close to the senior center, right next to 100 Center Street, as well as 120 Center, where Hebrew Senior Life also has some existing facilities. So I'm going to, without any further detail from me, introduce the Hebrew Senior Life team led by Deb Morse, VP for real estate, and they're going to give you a little more detailed presentation on what's behind the ask and what we and they are going to achieve with this very exciting project. Deb?
Thank you, Roger. And thank you, members of the select board. I also want to just thank so much Maria Morelli, Joe Viola, and David Guzman, who have been incredible advisors and giving us just wonderful assistance throughout this multi-year planning process for this all affordable senior housing community. Their development insights, their design insights have measurably improved the project that we intend to start construction on the end of February or the beginning of March. So I just really want to thank your staff for all the work that they have done to further this project. Sorry, I'm having a hard time. moving there. The 108s, and I'm joined by James Brown, who's the executive director of our Center Communities of Brookline community. He is overseeing 511 of mixed income senior housing units along Center Street and some along Beacon Street. The 108 Center Street project will further that mission of creating 54 all affordable senior housing units. The building has been designed to meet passive house standards. It will be fossil fuel free with the exception of the domestic hot water. And the design meets all of the Commonwealth senior housing guidelines and is accessible to anybody, whether they have a stroller or a walker or a wheelchair. It's a fully accessible community. As Roger mentioned, the location on Center Street is fantastic. Hebrew Senior Life has owned this vacant Victorian building since 2002. It will be demolished, and in its place will be the new 7-story 108 Center Street community. It is directly behind the Brookline Senior Center. And part of the design program, of course, is to create a physical linkage that enables people from the senior center to move seamlessly into our CCB community. We are going to have 4,200 square feet of community space on the first floor of 108 Center that we intend for seniors throughout Brookline to use. It will not be restricted to just residents in the CCB community. We've made a lot of progress, again, with many thanks to staff in Brookline. With your support, we were able to submit a very competitive application to the Commonwealth's Department of Housing and Community Development in January. Surprising, I think, to everyone, we actually were awarded the funds that we asked for the very first time we asked for them. Most sponsors have to go back to DHCD 2 and sometimes 3 times. But because of the support from the town of Brookline, both financial and through its comprehensive permit process, I think our project really stood out and we were awarded the funds in the summer of 2022. Last month, we went back to the Housing Advisory Board, as Roger mentioned, and talked about the current macroeconomic environment and what that has done to this project. And as usual, the HAB was very supportive, understood the economics of the deal, and voted to approve the additional funding request. So we're in front of you today to sort of hopefully finalize that request. Next month, we will go to Mass Development to get its final approval for an allocation of tax exempt debt, which is critical for this project. We anticipate starting construction at the end of February, the beginning of March, and it will be a 22-month construction period. The sources of funds have gone up a little over $3 million since you last saw us in September of 2021. We have been able to make up that difference in a variety of ways. We've been able to increase the permanent mortgage on the property, notwithstanding the increase in interest rates. The subsidy attached to many of these units has also gone up, which has facilitated our ability to increase that mortgage. The state has put in some additional funds. We have successfully raised the $2.5 million of philanthropy that we intend to invest in this project, really for that first floor community space that will be used hopefully by all seniors from Brookline. As Roger mentioned, we are asking for an increase in the HAB funds. We have opted to defer a portion of our developer fee to make this project work. And then our equity raise has also gone up. It's a bit more competitive than we had thought. So we were able to bring in some additional equity. So all of these, with the exception of the funds from Brookline, all of these other sources have been formally and finally committed and are secured. And tonight is really our final our final ask for the additional funds so that the project can move forward. Also, as Roger mentioned, you can see from this slide that the increased costs are really attributed to 2 things: the cost of construction and the interest rate. Our selected general contractor has agreed to hold its price until March of 2022, which means we really do have to close and begin construction. We have gone through a very aggressive value engineering process to make sure that we've looked at the line item costs for everything related to construction, while making sure that we hold the design principles that the town will hold us accountable for. So we've done everything we can to manage the construction costs, and we think we're in a very good place. The other cost driver is we will be taking out a large construction loan to make this project work, and the interest rates on that construction loan have gone up. Those are really the two primary cost drivers that have necessitated our request for additional funds from the town. Sort of with the assistance of Joe Viola and David Guzman, they came up with, I think, a very creative way to address the increased resources from the town, which is to say, we want to take 250,000 of that 675 and put it in what's called a macroeconomic reserve. That reserve will be tapped only if interest rates increase beyond what we have conservatively underwritten. If that's not the case, then we will not draw down these $250,000 line item. So I thought that was a really creative and smart way to address it. And it's also it continues to make the deal very transparent. We've underwritten conservatively on the interest rates. We hope that we actually don't have to tap into this 250,000. If we don't, we won't, and it will come back to the town before any other funds are returned. And just finally, some of the project impacts and highlights. So it's, we think it really is an important project and will benefit the town quite a bit. It's 54 more deeply subsidized affordable housing units for seniors. There will be a 25% local preference for seniors who live in Brookline. There's going to be 4,200 square feet of community space, most of which is going to be paid for through philanthropy that Hebrew Senior Life has successfully raised. We're going to enhance the whole campus. It's going to have much better outdoor space, walkways, benches, connections to each of the buildings and to the senior center. It's going to be designed to Passive House standards, so it'll be a very healthy and green environment for the residents and those who use the building. And then, as we mentioned, it will be fossil fuel free with the exception of domestic hot water. So we are happy to answer any questions you may have, but thank you for your time tonight.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions from board members? Make sure to use your hand raise feature. John?
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you to Hebrew Senior Life for persisting with this project in the face of some real challenges, and thank you as well to Housing Advisory Board, the Housing Trust Fund, and the Planning Department for stepping up and making this, enabling this to cross the finish line. I just want to say a word on behalf of the Brookline Senior Center, which you mentioned in your presentation as benefiting through connection to this building, and that's wonderful. I have visited the senior center on a few occasions recently, and the senior center is a wonderful tribute to the efforts of Brookline to serve the needs of the older adult population. But some years have gone by since that senior center was opened to local seniors, and it needs some help. It needs some modernization, or at least some attention to some of the basic facilities within it. The elevators need some painting, could use some sprucing up, and anything that can result in there being some parallel improvements to the senior center as a result of this project, I think is to be encouraged. So I just want to plant that thought with everyone, because you'll be hearing me bring that up again as this project moves forward. And thank you again.
Any other, Roger?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Deb if you might expound a little bit on the timeline and your required timeline for your various funding sources. I know some things have to be in kind of tight order at various dates to line up and get your various funding committed. And can you maybe fill in a little bit more about where your next steps and your hard deadlines are on that?
Sure. The hard deadline is that we need to hold the construction price. And that is really the very beginning of March. If we go past, if we begin construction after that date, the contractor could increase its price. We can't allow for that given the volatility in the construction market and the supply chain challenges. So we have assembled all of the resources that we need, and we actually have one of our first closing calls on Friday with all of the investors and the lenders and their legal counsel. And we will be working, through the holidays, talking with those funders every week and moving towards a closing. If we go past the end of February or the beginning of March, I don't know that we will have enough resources to build the project that everybody wants us to build. And so I really do feel like we have sort of 2 months ahead of us to tie everything up and begin construction. And Tara or James, if you think I might have left anything out, please jump in.
No, Deb, I think you got a great synopsis of everything that's going on.
Miriam?
Thank you. I just want to say this was one of the very first projects that I encountered as a new select board member, and I loved it then, and I still love it. So I think it's really great that Brookline is engaged in this and that we're doing this for our seniors, which make up 20% of the population of Brookline. And you have my support.
So getting back to the timeline question, are you looking for a vote tonight or a vote at our next meeting?
Ideally, we're looking for a vote tonight.
Okay. Any other questions from select board members? Chaz?
If you're looking for a vote tonight, and I apologize for this because it's difficult to kind of talk through the realities of it, but as you know, to John's point, the senior center currently rents on what I would call a discounted rate based on an old MOU number of parking spaces from Hebrew Senior Life. That's really vital to the operation of the senior center. We have been building into the budget cuts elsewhere in order to be able to meet your requirements, which is for market rate parking price for those 12 spaces. And actually, we were going to reduce them to 8. And so we had been thinking through that process. But given this ask, we were wondering whether Hebrew Senior Life might be amenable to, in exchange for the release of these funds, committing to a term of years for a reduced number of those spaces, 8 spaces, at the current rate. Although again, for a set term of years, not indefinitely, with a complete expiration date, and a promise from the town that we will not have an expired MOU going on for years without either of us noticing that. So that would be my ask, is that if we're going to do this, the benefit to the town would be that the town get 8 parking spaces at the current rate for the senior center.
I assume you might need some time.
Need some time to come back on that, but we can.
I know that we might, but I also know that James has been deeply involved in this conversation. So let
And
me.
James, like I said, if you didn't need a vote tonight, I wouldn't have put you on the spot. Honestly, it's my fault for not seeing this on the agenda and putting two and two together. So I apologize for putting you on the spot. But I think if the town is going to do this, then the town needs to realistically see the benefit from its investment here, and that involves making sure the senior center has adequate parking.
Yeah, so great segue on that one. I mean, the reality is I'll have to sort of, we need to vote on this. And so I'm, to be honest with you, feeling the pressure that's coming from this, holding up the vote over the parking for the MOU that has largely, the contract has been expired for close to 15 years. And we've been paying $35 a spot. I mean, we're charging town residents $205 a spot. I'm also trying to work and connect. Obviously, I've been trying to connect with you, Ruth Ann. I think 8 spots is important. We've been watching the spots, probably closer to about 4 or 5 that actually get utilized on a daily basis. So we could even get the spots down more and have some flexibility over time to change and add the spots. So, I mean, I'm open to the discussion. I truly, truly am. I would prefer not to make it contingent upon this vote. But I'm open to all the discussions, and as I've been, working to try and reach out and connect.
I know, and I appreciate that. And the reason why it's taken me a long time to get back to you on this is because the ask for the senior center's budget is significant. We're talking, in the 5 figures over time, which is, given, as John said, the conditions and what they have to do, it's not nothing. I would add too, and again, Hebrew Senior Life is an incredible contributor to the town, right? We really value that partnership. But you're a nonprofit. And one of the things the town meeting just charged us with is making sure that we have adequate pilot arrangements in place with our nonprofits. And making sure that they represent not monetary contributions necessarily, but contributions to the betterment of the town. My thought on this is, I understand. So you're talking about, the use of these parking spaces. You're talking about, why don't we say this then? And you can take it back. You can think through it. You can think whatever. For a term of 5 years, we'll take 5 parking spaces at the current rate, and we'll talk with you about market rate for the other 3 parking spaces. That will give us in the budget the opportunity to pay you something above what you're making now. You're not going to see a loss from that already minimal amount that we pay. I agree, it's a minimal amount. We can renegotiate that for a long-term pilot agreement that doesn't require you to pay money necessarily, but may involve some sort of benefit to the adjacent senior center. Can we do that? Can we do 5 at the current rate for 3 years?
Yeah, we can do. The answer is yes. We can do 5 at the current rate for 3 years.
Okay, and then we will negotiate with you for the other 3 at a market rate, which we think will be appropriate. And then the finance director will reach out in terms of thinking through longer term pilot arrangements. Again, it's not the way I would like to do business with you, and I don't think it's candidly fair to spring it on you. But again, the fact is that if it comes up tonight, and if you need it now, we need to talk it through. Otherwise, we're back where we started. So I appreciate this and I apologize, but we will talk through it.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from select board members? Well, I sat in on the presentation when it was presented before the HAB, and it was unanimously supported. So now that we have that detail squared away. Oh, Roger, did you want to add something?
Very, very quickly, one thing that I have looked for, and Heather, you were just saying you sat through and saw this part of it. When a supplemental ask comes back, as this one did, that the HAB is pretty aggressive about making sure that the applicant, HSL in this case, has really gone out and squeezed all the other sources of funding that are above us and beyond us. And I would say that we were all quite impressed that if you saw the other numbers that they got up on that sources table before they came to us to fill in the last gap, they did a good job on that. And also you can see there's conditions in your memo that are very important to what you're voting tonight. It's a firm commitment, but it's got conditions that are really critical to achieving what we're trying to do here. Thanks.
Yes, we're very fortunate to not only have the Housing Advisory Board to help us with this, but also partners like Hebrew Senior Life. So I will move approval of a final commitment of $4,050 to Hebrew
50,000.
Senior Life.
$4
Oh, is
million,
it?
50,000.
Okay. $4,050,000 to Hebrew Senior Life Incorporated for their project at 108 Center Street based on the recommendation and vote of the Housing Advisory Board on November 30th, 2022. All those in favor? Bernard?
Yes, enthusiastically.
John?
Yes.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Best of luck. Please keep us updated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the marijuana retail and medical license renewals public hearing. So this is a public hearing. If you wish to make a public comment, please get in touch with Devin Fields and let her know so that she can let me know. The first one that we are considering tonight is ComAv Canna.
Good evening, Chair Hamilton and Select Boards. Devin Fields, Assistant Town Administrator for Operations. While we continue to have a vacancy in our cannabis coordinator position, I have been running point on the marijuana renewal process. And the first retailer that you have before you is ComAv Canna, which, as this board is aware, is not yet open. But I'm pleased to report that I've been in communication with the team, and they will be coming before you likely at the end of January, beginning of February, to do their site plan review, public hearing, and commence with opening upon your approval. So we have received their renewal application. Their payment is complete. That memo is in your packet. It looks very similar to the memo that you received from them last year at this time, due to the factors at play with just slowing down construction and permit processes and them getting all of their materials ready to be able to open. That has just slowed down this process, which is why they're coming before you again requesting renewal, but we're pleased to report that they'll be opening in the next few months with your approval.
Great. Any questions from select board members? Again, this is a public hearing. So if you are a member of the public and wish to make a public comment, please get in touch with Devin Fields. Seeing no, oh, John?
I don't want at the last second. Do we place, when we grant a license, do we place an expiration date on it if they haven't, open for business within a certain time frame? How long would we allow a licensee to just get a license and then hold it, and take as long as they pleased to open a business?
That's a good question, John. There are very specific state regulations around that for alcohol, but not marijuana. And because the board did not put a policy on that, there hasn't been technically an expiration, but we have been working closely with ComAv Canna. They've been checking in with staff, making sure that they're, on top of what they need to be as far as their diversity plans and the mitigation factors that the other retailers have had to contend with. So we've been in communication with them throughout this process. If something were to happen, or if this board, wanted to take a look at that, if they don't, fulfill this public hearing in the next month or so, that's within your purview.
And I'll just reiterate that we revisit every single license on a yearly basis around this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are we taking all of these as a group, or one by one?
I would recommend one by one because some of them will need to be conditional on what's been submitted.
Okay. So again, this is a public hearing. We are talking about Com Ave Canna. Anyone from the public?
At this time, there are 18 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay. So I will close the public hearing for Com Ave Canna, and we will take a quick vote. I will move approval of the renewal application and license for Com Ave Canna Incorporated. Again, we revisit these licenses every single year, and we can revoke a license for cause at any time. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Excellent. The next license before you is going to be Mission, and we're in the process of promoting those folks right now.
Great. I see Attorney Jennifer DePazzo.
What do you mean?
Maybe you might want to mute Miriam.
Yeah. Good evening, board. My name is Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert, and I represent Mission and also NETA. Here with me this evening is James McMullen, Keandre Woody, Gabriel Mendoza, and Christy Shaw to answer any of your questions. We have submitted the application. There is some information that is being completed with respect to the Transportation Demand Management Plan and the monitoring report that is in the works and being wrapped up and will be submitted to the engineering division and to Devon for their review on that particular item. So that is one thing that is outstanding. You may have received or reviewed a letter that went to the board on November 22nd, just outlining some of the things that Mission would like to speak to the board further on, potentially in January or February. And that is bringing the host community agreement into compliance with the new law that went into effect on November 8th of 2022. Having a discussion on either eliminating or lessening the burden of the Transportation Demand Management Plan and the reporting requirements that are involved in that. And I know that Todd Corain is reviewing that as well. And then also there is a request from several of the license holders to be able to be open on Monday, Memorial Day, and any Monday holiday that falls after Christmas. And also to eliminate the community meeting, the annual community meeting, simply because the last meeting that they arranged, at least for Mission, there were no attendees whatsoever. And it is a lot to prepare a presentation. So we are looking for those particular license conditions to be modified in the future, and we've been in discussions with the town on those items. And other than that, we are all here and ready to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you so much. I don't see any questions from, before I spoke, Bernard first.
And John. Maybe a question for Devon. Each one of the three open stores each have comments from the traffic division regarding their traffic demand plan. Is there something going on here that we need to know about? I mean, they're basically the same comments for each one of them, and they are asking for. I think at least a couple of them are asking to eliminate that condition from the license. So. And what is the thinking of the town, and what else is going on here?
Thanks, Bernard. Sure. So I think there are a couple of things that Todd flagged as incomplete for the 3 open, which had to do specifically around the traffic impact study. So we require both the traffic impact study as well as a transportation demand management plan. The 2 other retailers did submit their transportation demand management plan completely, and we were just he identified some missing analysis that can kind of be summarized in a 1-page memo that he recommended that come back to his department, and that your approval be conditional upon that happening. As Attorney DePazzo Gilbert referenced, staff is meeting internally in the coming weeks to discuss recommendations for this board on what they should take a look at as far as removing some of these more stringent license conditions. Some of that will need to go through other regulatory bodies in addition to yourself. So we're going to make sure that we take a look at that process for you so that you see where this needs to start, the steps they need to follow, and then if you ultimately agree with those recommendations or not. I'll also remind the board that Brookline, as always, was first. And that is sometimes a challenging position to be in when you want to kind of protect the community, create some guardrails around terms of engagement. And so some of this, as we're coming to realize, and is not completely necessary for the retailers to be able to provide good service while making sure that the community is still doing well with these businesses in town. So that's something that we're going to review extensively internally before we come before you in January or February to make that recommendation.
John?
Thank you. Just want to comment on this question of the community meetings. My thinking on that is that we should go along with the request of the various applicants that we just drop that as a requirement, because I've had my own experience of, just out of a sense of duty to people. If I saw that one of the applicants was going to have their annual community meeting, I would put it on my calendar. And then I would make a point of making sure town meeting members knew, and hope to get the word out to neighborhood associations, et cetera. And the reality is, and it's a good reality, there are not that many people, and in the case of at least one of these applicants, maybe more than one, there were no people who showed up for the community meeting. And in part, I think it's because the initial period of where there were a lot of questions and concerns has passed. And these businesses have proven themselves and have gotten used to how to operate and to avoid creating too much inconvenience to the public in terms of customers coming and going and et cetera. But I also think we should just sort of state for the record, we don't really have any guidelines that are firm, as far as I can tell, as to if you're going to require a community meeting be held by a local entity, what exactly do we require of them in terms of making sure people know you're having the meeting? And I'm not sure we did our job in that regard. And I don't think that the outreach was maybe what would be required to make sure that everybody knew that might have an interest in attending the community meeting, that there was going to be a community meeting. I did see where one of the applicants provided a QR code that they apparently used to let people know there was going to be a community meeting. And so I checked out what happens if you use the QR code. And then I determined that the meeting was held via Microsoft Teams. I mean, it wasn't a Zoom meeting. And how many people are accustomed to doing meetings via Microsoft Teams? I'm not so sure. And the transcript is rather humorous. The meeting opens at 6 and it closes at like 6:01:30 because no one was in attendance. But as I say, for the record, I think the time has passed for us to require these annual community meetings. And so I sympathize with them on that.
Mike?
Thanks, Heather. I do agree that, we put a lot of things in place. We have a cannabis mitigation advisory committee that has had just astonishingly peaceful and sensible meetings, both on their own and with the operators of the two sites that we have going. And so I think we could lighten up on some of these things.
Once upon a time in 2019, Bernard and I were on the select board and cannabis was on the minds of every single resident in town. And I'm reminded that time kind of heals all wounds. This kind of feels like the Carlton Street footbridge. You wait long enough and the most controversial thing turns into something that I had a conversation with a few folks yesterday at the teen center, and we were talking about marijuana. And I said, oh, yeah, and there's a place in Coolidge Corner. And they literally said, what place? Where is it? And I'm like, you know what? This is a good problem to have. So I'm open to revisiting the policies. I am interested in finding out what the notice requirements are, and maybe what we can do is try to combine the two with this hearing, use this as the community forum, and maybe follow what we do for grants of location. You know, you notify abutters. We have something kind of spelled out where it's on the entity to pay for that, but town takes care of the notifications. One of the things that we will really have to understand is what we have control over versus what the CCC controls. So again, all of this is something that we will discuss at a later time, but you know, we just want to talk about it a little bit since you are up for the license renewal. Bernard, I see your hand up again.
Yeah. I agree that this may be time to drop that requirement, but I think there still has to be some opportunity for the community to engage with the select board, the marijuana mitigation committee, and the stores in the event that something comes up in the future that is as heated as what we saw in 2019, or maybe not as heated, but still something that requires an opportunity for the community to express their views and help us to come up with solutions to problems that may exist. So I don't think that requires continuing these public or these meetings, but you know, we still need to have something open, some door open for that type of community engagement with the stores if issues come up. So.
Thank you, Bernard. Any further comments from select board members? And if there aren't, Attorney Gilbert, do you have any comments that you wish to make?
No, just in response to what Bernard Green said, you know, we're totally open to that annual community meeting, the language being changed to something as simple as if the board requests that a community meeting be held due to concerns raised by abutters, your constituents, what have you. That's absolutely something that we would you know, welcome. If it's needed, it's needed. And just a reminder that there are phone numbers for all of the managers and contact folks that are out there and can be made public and are public and part of the application. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who have said that they wish to make a public comment?
At this time, there are 13 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
I will close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion from the board before I move the language to be voted on? Bernard?
Yeah, I did have a comment, and I'm trying to find it in my notes here. It has to do with the diversity plan for, let's see, which one are we talking about? Mission. And just a comment and hope that you will improve it. It's very heavy on aspiration, but very light on achievement. And I think that, that's something that is a problem. We don't want, you to want to have a diverse workforce, et cetera. We want you to actually achieve it. That's one comment, but also I'm a little concerned that the diversity plan did not address the fact that the legalization statute was really designed to provide a means to mitigate the damage done to Black and Brown communities by the criminalization of marijuana. And you can't really separate a diversity plan from that sort of context for marijuana legalization. I mean, I know everyone needs a diversity plan, but marijuana or cannabis businesses need to really make sure that they're focusing on the original intent of the legislation, and that is to address the damage that was done by legalization to those communities. I'm not, saying that we don't vote this, but I'm just saying that you need to make your diversity plan a lot more focused and appropriate to the cannabis industry.
Thank you for that comment. We'll take a look at that and be sure to address it. And thankfully, the state has finally addressed it in some way in the new law as well.
All right. And if you don't mind, could you just send the select board any revisions you make? I'm interested and I'm sure other select board members may be also.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This could be something that the CMAC committee can be helpful with. Okay, so I will move the language. I move approval of the renewal application and license based on the conditions pertaining to the marijuana retail license held by I'm sorry. Okay, I move approval of the renewal application license conditions for Mission conditional on their complete submission of the transportation requirements. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. The next one is sanctuary.
Did we do Netta?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
We're saving that one for last.
You cut out for a second. Did you call on me?
Yes.
Oh, I
Hi,
missed.
Attorney Allen. We just promoted you all. We're going to be holding a public hearing for the license renewal for sanctuary.
You did that. I was in the spin phase.
No worries.
I'm sorry. I think we're sort of in the same situation as Jennifer just outlined for you. I can tell you, first off, we've had a very, from your perspective, an uneventful year. No problems, no overcrowding, no queuing, traffic issues, no law enforcement issues. We had one act of a citizen perpetrating vandalism on us that the Brookline police quickly responded to, made an arrest, and it's being dealt with. And however the courts see appropriate. We have concerns about, as Jennifer mentioned, we share their concerns on licensing conditions. We have concerns on the same licensing conditions she outlined. We also, on the HCA, have the same concerns. So I will say that we've opened a dialogue. I had the pleasure of meeting Chaz for the first time. Had a nice meeting with Chaz. I should also, my associate Brianna is on here somewhere with me tonight. And the two of us had a nice meeting with Chaz, town council, Devin, and we hashed out what the issues were. We certainly didn't approach any conclusions, but it was an opening of a dialogue. I think we plan to get together again in January, a subsequent meeting to that. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and it's been a little delayed because of staffing issues on the town side. We, about the licensing condition, and we understand that. But I think, Madam Chair, you pointed out something that's critical on this legal licensing issues. It's not 2019 anymore. The cannabis landscape has changed dramatically between competition and so forth. And we consider ourselves, and we're operating as just another retail outlet in Coolidge Corner, and it's sort of nondescript. We sort of hide behind the art gallery. So with all of those situations, we have the same concerns as I mentioned on the licensing conditions, but we'll deal with that in time. We have our diversity program, and we also have a mentorship program because we want to draw people, minorities in to not only working retail, but to make this a career and to make this, give them a chance to succeed in a management role and prosper in that. So that we have launched that in 2022. Expect that to grow significantly in 2023. Try to become a model citizen. We donate to Brookline charities. We try to use Brookline vendors. I really, and I think in terms of, we also had a community meeting that nobody attended. It was on the town calendar. It was on our website and all our social media. And I think that's because Mr. Sandman's committee really serves that role. I mean, if there's issues or something to be discussed, we regularly attend that and we respond. So that, we had a minor issue where someone felt that the parking lot we rent needed the grass to be cut. Came up at his committee's meeting, the grass was cut in 24 hours. So it's just it's a communication issue and so forth. So I can't make it more complicated than that. It's really been a seamless year. We understand the concern on the traffic material, and we'll get that to you. But once again, it's not 2019. We're in Coolidge Corner. It's hard to figure any traffic impact because we're probably one of the retail operations in Coolidge Corner that isn't drawing. Thankfully, the theater draws more than us, so that's acceptable. We're just another business in the area. It's different than 2019. There's no queuing on the street. There's been no loitering. So it's really been a quiet year from a license.
I really appreciate that as someone who lives very close to Coolidge Corner. I actually really enjoy the art that you guys put in the gallery. I find it to be very interesting, very thought-provoking. Miriam and I actually popped in on first night. And so I really appreciate the party favor cupcakes.
I was about to say mostly for the cupcakes.
Were they laced? Anything?
A great
I
Brookline.
hope not, because I can't handle that stuff.
I've been in Brookline a long time, and those cupcakes have been popular for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't need to be laced with
They're laced
anything.
with sugar and fat. That's right.
But it is
They hold
nice to
their
have.
own.
It is nice to have a good cupcake store across from me.
Any questions from board members? Bernard, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's
Yeah,
from
Yeah,
previous
it is. I apologize for my cupcake comment, but I'm a guy of the 60s, and that is how cupcakes came back then. At any rate, I have two questions. I just want to make a comment first. I really think your gallery is great. I don't go to your store very often, but I was there a few months ago with my daughter, who is an adult. Okay. And she was impressed by one of the pop-up retailers that you had there. And it was, I looked it up, Strong Black Girl Workout Attire. I think she bought something and she was impressed by it. So whatever that means, thank you for providing that type of resource to the community. My two questions. First of all, your mentoring program sounds like a great program. You had 4 students in the program, but none of them graduated. And I guess my question is, I'm not saying that that's, a bad sign or anything, but I would like to get a sense of, what lessons you learned from that experience that you're going to use going forward. Because I think this is an incredibly important program. My other question has to do with, I'm looking for my notes, your alarms. You seem to have an awfully high level of faulty alarm notices. And is that something that's normal with alarm systems, or is that something else that's going on? So.
Well, David, do you want to take the mentoring or someone else? Who am I going to put on?
Yes, Jeffrey, that'd be my pleasure. Thank you. And good evening to all the members of the select board. And Bernard, you raised a really good question that I hearken back to our last select board meeting when you specifically raised an excellent point about creating a pathway, not just to a sustainable career, but to ownership. And that was probably the 30,000 foot mistake view that we made. And to give it to you in simplistic terms, the mentees that we were working with had the understanding that after 2 months, they should not only be in upper management, but they should be on their way to ownership. That's been an ongoing problem with many of the younger people who work with the company. They don't fully understand yet what it takes to build a career path. And with that, we had a number of issues in educating our mentees on just that, what it really takes in order to, if you will, matriculate up the ladder from hands-on into middle management, into upper management, and then possibly not in 2 months, but maybe in 2 years, one would be ready to assume the role of an owner within a cannabis business. That was disheartening to any number of students or mentees. And of course, that was something that they were not expecting. We have had some internal conversations on how to adjust the expectations of those mentees and how to be sure that they understand that it's one step at a time, 1 foot in front of the next. Having said that, there were lessons learned, valuable lessons, life skill lessons, and Sanctuary also took a lot of notes, and we're excited about what 2023 will bring and how we're going to tweak the program so that maybe we're not quite as hard and our expectation level is a little less, and the same for the mentees who'll be joining us for the 2023 season. Any other questions I can answer on that, Bernard, or anyone else, please?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think my point is that, I wouldn't call it a failure, but, you didn't achieve what you expected the first year. That's sometimes good because it gives you an opportunity to learn how to improve so that the next year and the following years, you actually achieve some of your goals. So I appreciate, what you said. I think it is responsive to my question. And, I sort of encourage you to just make sure that you never stop, learning from mistakes or learning from failures, so that, you achieve the goals at some point.
Karen, are you in a position to talk about our alarm system?
Yeah, I can speak on the alarm system. I'm not 100% aware of how many faulty notifications you've received from that. That wasn't brought to my attention prior to this meeting. So if you have a report.
It's in the materials.
Okay.
Chart there. Yeah.
We'll look into that. I guess the best thing is rather than avoid the question, because we don't know we'll look into it and see if there's fine tuning needed
Yeah, no, that's all I was asking. I mean, it
Yeah.
just stood out, and I think,
We'd
hopefully
rather have-
we'll figure out what's going on.
We would rather have it go off too much than not double check.
Yeah, they've never resulted in any issues, so it might be somebody just not getting to the door quick enough because we have it set at such a short time period to be able to disarm the alarm, so.
We'll look into that though.
Great. This is a public hearing, so if you are a member of the public, please notify Devon Fields that you wish to make a public comment. Any other discussion from board members? Devon, anyone try to get your attention from the public?
At this time, there are 8 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
I will close the public hearing. Any further discussion from board members? I don't believe your transportation plan is missing, so this will not be a conditional approval?
I think we might be missing a little bit.
Okay.
Yes. So I've updated that vote language in your script. Their transportation demand management plan has been submitted, but we're missing just a couple of the specific asks around mode splits for how employees get to work, as well as the number of transactions that have taken place in 2022 and traffic monitoring.
Great. Thank you so much, Devon. So if there are no further comments from select board members, I can move the renewal language. And I will do that. I move approval of the renewal application and license conditions for Sanctuary Medicinals, conditional on their complete submission of the transportation requirements. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good holiday, everybody.
So last and certainly not least, Netta. I see Attorney Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert back.
Yes, thank you. Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert. And here with me this evening on behalf of NETA is Lauren Berm, James Jackson, and Ali Enriquez. So they should all be, I see they're all promoted. So thank you so much. Saving the best for last. As usual, here on behalf of NETA, it's really interesting. It's a completely different business than it was when we first started out with the medical licensing in 2016. Certainly operations are smooth and consistent. No queuing, no lines, no real issues at the site. We do want to go over some of the things we're requesting, and we know that we'll speak about it again with the town. We had a great meeting. I had a great meeting with Mr. Carey and the new first assistant town council and Melissa Goff, and we went over this. We're going to meet again, but there are 7 items that NETA is hoping that will be addressed in the upcoming weeks and months. And that is with respect to police details. NETA is requesting a reduction in those details to weekends and busy times, or as recommended by the police department. Also on the transportation demand management plan, we'd like to revisit those requirements. They are really expensive on the monitoring side and the traffic side and the other items that I know Todd Corain is going over with. And with respect to the outstanding traffic items that are Todd Corain noticed in his December 9th memo to the board, we did have NETA's transportation and traffic engineer, Scott Thornton, meet today with Rob King and with Todd Corain and Dan Martin. And some of the items are ready to be submitted. I think there was a little bit of confusion. We had done an additional traffic study that was part of the courier licensing and also part of the extended hours. And so there was also a traffic impact study from 2021, and those numbers simply need to be updated. So they worked that out this afternoon, and we'll be submitting those final items through our traffic engineer as soon as possible. Again, the third item is the annual community meeting. We're requesting that that be eliminated, or as might be requested by the town. The porta potties, there are 2 porta potties out there. They're not used. They were used when Netta had, over 3,000 people coming a day, and there were lines. That simply doesn't exist anymore. They're not used. And also the Netta's pest control person came and thinks that they are attracting rodents, nesting underneath them and things like that. And I know that rodents are a problem all over Brookline, Boston, everywhere. And so if we can get rid of that, that would be great. Again, Memorial Day opening and any Monday that falls after the Christmas holiday, requesting to be open on those days. We know that the town doesn't require that package stores or pharmacies or bars be closed on those days, and we'd like to finally be treated the same. Homewood Suites, we had rented at the height of traffic and customers. We had rented some spaces from the Homewood Suites. Those spaces have not been used, and they were quite expensive. And so we'd like, I think the traffic counts will make it clear when those are updated to Todd Corain that those spots they're not utilized. They haven't been for some time. And so we'd like to remove that condition as well. And then finally, amending the host community agreement to be in compliance with the new law. Other than that, we're here to answer any of the board's questions, and welcome the opportunity to do that.
Great, thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so anyone from the public who wishes to make a public comment, please notify Devon Fields. Mike Seaman.
Yes, with regard to the community agreement, I realize that that's not on the table here, but you are asking us for a number of concessions that will save a fair amount of money based on what you just said about the cost of parking spaces and so forth. And so I hope that that will all be wrapped in together when we talk about the host agreements.
The host agreements or the community meeting?
Sorry, the host agreements.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from select board members? Anyone from the public?
At this time, there are 3 attendees. No one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
What a difference 2.5 years makes. Okay, any further discussion from the board? I will close the public hearing. Seeing none, I will move the language to be voted. I move approval of the renewal application and license conditions for Netta. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much for
Thank
all
you.
that you're doing.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
That is the conclusion of our business tonight.
Chair Hamilton, I was just hoping to touch on a couple of things that board members brought up tonight. I want to credit the marijuana retailers for reaching out on best practices for how they should publicize their community meetings. They reached out to town staff, asking about SUFA signs, if they should notice in the newspaper. So I will say that there was, we actually used an iteration of the select board's possibly now defunct public notice policy that town meeting did not approve in that bylaw change. So that was the guidance that we gave them, and I believe they were all in compliance with that. So there was an effort made, and I want the retailers to get credit for that. Additionally, town staff, as we've mentioned, are in the process of putting these meetings together to discuss not only the license conditions, but also the host community agreements. I am working very closely with all of the enforcement departments and asking them to track their time, including in this very recent memory, how long it took them to review all of these license conditions. And those are the types of things that we'll be taking into consideration and then presenting you with information on as the HCA conversations continue and these license conditions. And I'll just turn it over to Chaz if he'd like to, wrap this up.
And I want to thank Kevin, as she pointed out, with the cannabis coordination specialist vacant. She's taken on a huge amount of work to make this happen. And so thank you for all the efforts that you do. We are going to have these meetings early in January. We already have control dates set with the vendors. We're excited to have these discussions. We know the law has changed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that HCAs go away. It just means that they change and the process for them changes. So we're going to have an equitable and fair discussion with these vendors to ensure that the costs that are line items that are reasonably related to the actual costs that we incur for these businesses are going to be covered under these HCAs. So we look forward to bringing it back to the greater board.
Right. I think something that might be helpful going forward is to do kind of a joint hearing between the select board, these vendors, and then CMAC. And we have a predictable date in December. Like, it's always the second or third Tuesday of December. And that we take ownership of the publication, but that they pay for it. Just something to keep in mind. Any other discussion from select board members? Well, we were cautious that we were going to have another town meeting night, so I'm pleased that that was not the case. Thank you all, and try to rest up. We have the summit on Thursday. We have another select board meeting next Tuesday, and then we will break for 2 weeks.
Oh, sorry.
Mike.
I just want to mention, I don't know if we're all aware of this, but the meeting is posted for 12, but we're having getting organized and so forth, and should be there at 11 in order to get off to a smooth start, I guess is the best way to put it.
That's right. And he'll be served and refreshments for the board so that we can have, we can be fed and ready to start promptly at 12.
That is good.
Excellent. Well, see you there.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.